What up, y'all? How we doing today? Hope everybody's doing fine and well today on this wonderful evening of January 9th. Today I got a quick video, should be a quicker one, with Maurice Clarett. He's a former Ohio State football player who's going to speak on some things related to young people, specifically African Americans in marginalized areas, underserved communities, our brothers and sisters who are in a different mind state, coming from a different life experience, but nonetheless a real life experience, right? He's gonna comment on, his upbringing, his experience with that lifestyle, his family background, you know, his input on what causes that lifestyle to permeate through our culture, and what causes us to glorify it or think it's okay and think it's normal in this modern era when we've been doing it so long, right? We've been in these generational curses for so long. So he's a super relevant opinion, because he's lived it, because he's been there, and he's currently contributing to, the reduction of these types of issues within our community that really lie within the heart and in the conscience of our community. Background on Maurice: he's like the college expert for "It Is What It Is," the podcast with Cameron and Mace, which is a pretty entertaining podcast. I don't know if it's a lot of people's style, but nonetheless they do a good thing. So he's a man of many talents. So salute to this brother Maurice Clarett. I'm a comment on my perspectives and my input on the things that he shares in this Instagram post. But without further ado, let's jump right in.
And I was just thinking this morning, I'm often called to different colleges, high schools, and middle schools to speak to, young kids coming up. And oftentimes the administrative bodies are, asking me or trying to help me to help them figure out, why do kids behave the way that they do, or how do things come to be? And it made me just think back to just my own childhood, or it always makes me think back to my own childhood of how things came to be what they are. And oftentimes, things that people think contribute to the core cause of the issue, they're more wrong than right. And I think like some of the times the easy thing is to say, bad parenting or music. And I think that those are contributing factors, but also I don't think that people just simply call things for what they are. That sometimes when you're in a crazy environment, just crazy behavior happens. And I share just like a quick story of just me, and how I got into crime, like outside of the car stealing that I did when I was younger, but more into hustling. And this is just the environment, opportunity, circumstance, and looking for a way to get out, right? And so I remember I was like in the seventh grade, and my brother, he had been selling drugs for a few years, right? I think 3 years younger than my older brother. And so I was probably 13, I think 13, 12 or 13 in the seventh grade. And he was 15. I remember he would come back home and, he would have the dope that he was selling and the money that he was selling. He would have it in his top drawer. And I remember when he would leave, I would sneak in there and I would look in there and I would see all his money. And that was like the initial fascination, or him being able to do something for himself that either my mother or somebody else couldn't do for us, and I thought that that was like the path. And it wasn't because of bad parenting, and it wasn't because of music. It was simply because of like just the environment and the craziness that we were around. It sort of drives a different behavior. And if you're not really from these environments, it's kind of hard to get, and it's easy to sort of blame. But I remember I was in school and I went to the lunchroom, and one of our lunch aides was a lady who used to buy drugs off of him. And she was like, "Yo, I'm looking for your brother. Can you tell him I'm looking for him?" And I was like, "What are you looking for him for?" And she was like, "I'm trying to, buy some work." And at this time, I was like being opportunistic, knowing that my brother wouldn't allow me to sell drugs. I was like, I'm looking to cop drugs too. If you know somebody else and we can't get in touch with my brother, like basically, can you, help me out? And so she was like, yeah. So I gave her like 250 bucks. And she took my money, and she lived right around the corner from the school. And she said, come see me after school. And so she had bought the work, and she had cooked it up. And you mind you, this is seventh grade. Like, it sounds crazy now, being a 40-year-old adult, but she cooked it up. And then she had said, hey man, you just sit here and I'll bring the drug fiends or the dope fiends over to buy work off of you. And that initially right there is what sparked me. We hustling in the house, or me and my dude who went to school, we would go over there, we would hustle at the house. And I thought like it was the coolest thing in the world, learning how to rent fame cars and selling dope. And you thinking that you're living like your older brother, and you're living sort of like this drug lifestyle, but you don't know what this is actually doing to you, towards your future, or to anything for that regard. And there was nothing in that experience that initially sparked me that had me that had anything to do with my mother, or any sort of music or other external influence, other than the neighborhood and the environment and the craziness that somehow these inner city streets just are. And that's just a fact of life. And I don't know how you eradicate that, or wipe it out in general, but that was like the contributing influence. And then, you sort of graduate that, like, you don't know that you have a talent for football, and that you can, be special one day, because all you know is what you see and what you do. But obviously, you all seen that I ended up going to high school and became the best football player in the world, and obviously going to college. But when football was over in college, what did I return back to? I turned right back into that same person who was hustling and doing everything else. And so where it went from me buying a quarter ounce, basically when I was done with football, there was a person who had half a joint, half a bird. And he was like, I think at this time birds was like 23, and he was like, I got a half for you for 12. And I sold a half in like a day. And then the next thing you know, everything sort of escalated and moved from there. And then, you're in a full blown street life. And none of this stuff had anything to do with bad parenting or rap music, but it had everything to do with circumstances, right? And so the natural question is like, how do you get out of that? And this is where it goes into what I sort of preach now to younger kids. And so you graduate all of those experiences, and you go back. You graduate all those experiences, you end up going to jail. And the only thing that happens when I go to jail that really changed my life, that I tell everybody, was that I educated myself. I began to read, educate myself, and search for opportunity where the education made sense, right? And what I'm referring to is that, like I said, okay, I enjoy hustling, I enjoy selling drugs, which means I enjoy business in some regard. And now, how do I identify what skill set that I have? How do I place this skill set on the opportunity? And then how do I exercise it? How do I do that so I'm not putting myself back in jail? And then where are these opportunities at, right? And so that's all I did, And when I go back to teachers, be it in high school, be it in college, or be it from a juvenile standpoint, I try to take that same message, that what are you educating these kids on? How does it help them make a living? And then how do you connect these people to opportunity, right? And so I think like if that's the steady conversation, if you're trying to influence kids, talking about education, talking about awareness, and talking about connecting them to opportunity, I think you get a lot more mileage than sort of talking about, the condition that we're in is because of parents or rap music or somebody else. And I'm not saying that, everybody doesn't have a right to their opinion or a right to express their opinion, but I'm saying that if you're trying to get mileage out of anybody and anything, focusing on where you need to go and what you need to do, I would want that to dominate the airways and everything. So if you ever see me, or if you ever book me for an event, all of these stories will be a part of it, and I would have a longer time to talk about it. But that's just my personal experience, right? It wasn't any one thing or any one person who negatively influenced me or my brothers, anybody. It's just, when you come from a fucked up. Yo, what's up? And I was just thinking this morning.
Yo, I mean, shout out to Maurice, bro. Really great perspective. Really interesting take on his experience jumping in the street life, what contributed to his decision making, how he views others, the collective black community, why some of our youth gravitate to these things, gravitate to this. Just, from my like initial thought is there's a strong correlation between, yes, his circumstance, but also who he viewed, like what his role model and foundation was, right? I mean, his brother, I'm sure, was a great person, right? Certainly a hustler trying to get his, and trying to put food on the table, whatever you have. But nevertheless, his brother was his role model, right? Like you see at the beginning of his story, the correlation and the imagery of people similar to his brother for younger generations, right? We're always looking up to those big homies, to those people who are paving a way. But as he alluded to earlier, oftentimes our youth, we're coming from an uneducated standpoint. We're not thinking long term. We're coming from, what is my immediate environment? What does success look like immediately surrounding me? Like, I don't have a wider perspective to know the long term detriment of doing this, or the long term purpose and longevity of this type of money, this type of fast life, right? So there's to me, a strong indicator of who our role models are in our immediate circles, but also for the culture as a whole, who we put on a pedestal as a role model, and what values do we put first in a role model, right? Nobody's perfect, but we have to be more intentional, especially as a black community, who we co-sign, who we give our money to, especially as consumers of culture and pop culture and entertainment. Um, and then another thing I noticed is this correlation to being a provider and being a hustler, right? Oftentimes we want to be a hustler so we can be the provider. And being a hustler often, entails by any means necessary, right? I'm gonna get it how I'm gonna get in how I fit in, right? So whether that's drugs, whether that's hard, whether that's weed, whatever it might be, whether it's robbing and stealing, his environment dictates what he defines as a worthy hustle. But nevertheless, the correlation to being a provider is the same, right? And you have people at the top of what we would call society, by our high standards, who are rich, right? They're educated, they're in the banking sector, they're in whatever sector it might be, and they're at the top of their fields. They often do some immoral stuff to that you would consider a hustle to be a greater provider, right? So we might demonize something that Maurice did, but what's more evil? Is one more subjectively worse or the other, right? Is it just because he's coming at from a black community or a gangbang community that what he was doing is worse than what these big wigs are doing at the top, right? So there, it can't be subjective, right? As a people, we have to find some objective truth, and whatever that is gonna better inform how we view what a provider should be and how we view what a hustle should look like. And I think as a community, as humans, all we lack foresight into God's provision, right? You heard from Maurice. The thing that made him turn around was he began to get educated, right? It sounds like he did some time after he graduated college. He was the man on campus, right? Really the man in America, being as good as he was at football. But nonetheless, when he got back, he was the same person he was before college. He was hustling, moving backwards, moving fast, whatever you want to call it. And all of that was to be, to control his own destiny in his own hand and be his own provider, right? So sometimes we have a lack of foresight for God's provision, right? If we have faith in the person who created us and put us on this earth, we also have faith in the promises that he has left with us to be a provider, to never let us suffer beyond more than we can bear, right? All these verses that you could reference in the Bible that shows God to be a friend and shows him to be trustworthy and shows him to be a provider, not on our terms but on his terms, because he knows what we need. He is the most trustworthy being that you can, right? If humans always try to take everything in their own hands, where is that going to lead? Where has that historically shown us a benefit? Really, never. At times we do good, at times we do bad. We can't be the judge of our society and the providers of our society and simultaneously be the same ones who destroy it. We can't, that's not a sufficient level of justice. There really is no justice in that. So we have to trust it in a higher power. That's just my opinion. Uh, so is our underlying purpose to serve ourselves, right? Or to serve God? If the cumulative efforts of our every person that is on the earth is to serve themselves, that's a destructive society because my version of serving myself might conflict with you. And now we have destruction. Now we have bickering. Now we have jealousy. Now we have envy. So even if you're doing something positive like Maurice is doing, like props to him, I'm proud of the brother for what he's continuing to do. It has to be more than that. And the foundation of that, where we make the pivot and start walking into the light, is exactly what he alluded to earlier. You don't know what you don't know. The second that he started to read and educate himself on different ways to get it and different ways and different points of knowledge that indicate, okay, what's my purpose, right? When we start to educate ourselves on God, who God is, what God has our purpose to be, now we'll go from being street hustlers to being good businessmen and good people according to the world to now being people of God, right? It's levels to it. You can be good and not believe in God, but that's really a subjective goodness. That doesn't really fix the problems, right? We have people, with positive ambitions and productive ambitions all over society, but we still have war everywhere. We still have jealousy everywhere. We still have envy everywhere. Us humans can't be trusted to fix that when we're the same ones who cause it continually, generation after generation. We have case study of generation after generation. And we have now 2023. What continent doesn't have strife and suffering and war in it? We're more technologically advanced than ever, but morally and spiritually, often, we're stuck in the past. So that's kind of a deeper level and reflection on what he's talking about. I don't think what he's talking about is wrong. It's extremely relevant to the black community. But like he said, education is the next step that will put you knowledge and understanding, right? Can we get a grasp and understand that we can't do this ourselves as humans, right? Access to opportunities, relationships, education, all that is important. All that is things we need to improve in our black community. But it doesn't stop there is the only thing I'm trying to say. There's an even higher and better way, and it's through Jesus Christ, right? So, nevertheless, I think it's a powerful dialogue. Shout out to Maurice for, you know, continuing to do things. Like, I'm truly proud of that brother, and I hope God continues to work and use him for these types of positive experiences and knowledge sharing. But that's it for today, y'all. Well, actually, this kind of relates. He mentions that music and parenting doesn't, in his opinion, doesn't contribute to our, some of the generational curses, and it's really just circumstance. I would argue foundationally, it's like they all contribute. They all contribute to it collectively, right? Because even though it's circumstance, you have some people glorifying that circumstance, right? Or if it's education and a role model that you think really dictates where our young youth, our young black youth move towards, well, music and entertainment is a huge platform for who role models are, and is a huge source of truth for what people think is normal and good in our society, right? If you have all these women talking about twerking and f my baby daddy, what you think? If people are fans of that music, especially the youth, what do you think they're screaming in the hallways of these middle schoolers in these middle schools? Or if you have on the flip side, I'm gonna stack my paper by any means necessary. Whoever gets in my way, you know, off with their head, right? If you got a middle schooler screaming that, what you think is gonna happen? That's both education and being a role model. So, I think I think music and certainly parenting, if they're propagating these types of behaviors, is a crucial role in what our circumstances end up becoming. But I'm gonna cap it off there. Like I said, great dialogue, great conversation. It's been another episode of The Observation with your boy Kaffa Kid, where we talk about what it was and what it is. I appreciate y'all if you made it this far. Appreciate everyone who tunes in. And if you would please like, share, subscribe, turn on post notifications if you enjoy this content. I think this is really helpful dialogue for everyone to be a part of. So please share and run up that algorithm. You know how that goes. But I appreciate everyone for watching. Peace.